Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Confessions of a Fitness Manager. My name is Staci Alden. I'm here today with.
Jessica Rogers, how are we today?
We're doing well, I think. So
I'm
we we always talk about beverages. Go, Jessica. What are you drinking today?
I'm very excited to talk about my beverage, Stacey. I am drinking another glass of rosé today. It's delicious and
Lovely.
I'm excited for it.
She
What are you
lives the
drinking today?
she lives the life of rosé all day.
Love it.
Only I know she doesn't rosé all day. Trust me. Um, I am drinking sparkling water. So tasty, so hydrating. I prefer the orangey lemony flavors from Trader Joe's. If you've ever had their mineral water with, of course, ice. And at this point, I mean, we're filming in May, and both of us are experiencing great weather right now, which is so nice.
That's
Um,
why I'm drinking rosé tonight. It's a
yes,
rosé kind of day.
yes. And then previous episodes, when you might have seen her drinking cab or like a darker wine, it was much more cold in the
And
Chicago
yeah,
area.
there was a hot chocolate episode too.
Oh yes, I remember. I totally
Yeah.
remember.
Not a
Uh,
hot chocolate kind of day. It is beautiful. We're finally getting to summer, so it is a rosé kind of day, Stacey. So cheers.
I love it. Yes, cheers. So, today we are talking about which some of you may want to pour a glass of wine for because it's stressful,
Mm,
or
very
whatever
stressful.
beverage of choice you have, um, is compensation. So, we
Mhm.
call this episode the compensation equation. We're going to do our best to really, we're not going to solve the equation for you. I'm sorry. If you thought
No.
that that was this episode, it's not. The fitness industry is complicated with a
Mm,
capital C. So we're going to do our best to decipher, what are the possibilities of compensation? What are some incredible stories that we've both had with applicants, with continuing to teach with us, instructors and personal trainers, with the challenge. I don't want to say fight, but the challenge of compensation when there's a facility that's trying to pay the bills and, you know, as much as they can keep up with compensation, but also has to look at what other facilities might be paying.
mm,
And in some cases, that's the form of studios. Studio compensation is very different from a larger club facility compensation.
mhm.
And while Jessica and I both believe strongly that people in the fitness industry, whether you manage, you own, or you are a trainer or instructor, you should be getting paid more. Majority of us deserve more than what we are making in the industry. But what we'll tackle today is our suggestions on, really countrywide, the best that we can as far as best practices for compensating your team, strategies to get creative, and ways you can even compensate them without technically increasing their pay. So we'll
Mhm.
talk about all of those things. We aren't going to get specific just to set expectations on exactly what to pay people, but we will give you some ideas of ways to research in your area what is fair among other facilities. And so we're going to dive into that. I'm going to let Jessica go ahead and start us off with her story of a compensation story for all of us.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Stacey. So this is a recent story. I am at my current facility. I'm hiring for full-time and part-time personal trainers. So one thing that we've kind of experienced, just to backpedal a little bit, is historically, I think most facilities have only hired full-time trainers. And I can't speak for other club studios, but it has really been a struggle to get a full-time personal trainer on board. So we decided to open it up to part-time personal trainers with certain guidelines, meaning that because my facility is right in the downtown of Chicago, that if you are a trainer, we'll hire you on part-time, assuming that you're not working, training anywhere else within a 1 mile radius. So pretty reasonable expectation to bring in part-time instructors and part-time trainers. So that has kind of opened the gates for some more applicants to come our way. So we've been getting some full-time and part-time applicants. One applicant that we recently had was for a full-time position. This is an applicant who is from out of state. He is a college student finishing up his senior year. His resume was perfect. Like, he is studying kinesiology or something similar. He has a little bit of personal training experience from his university fitness center. He is certified, which is hard to come by from a 22, 23-year-old college student. So he checked all the boxes. So I set up a virtual interview with him and it went great. So I passed him along to my superior and it went great. So we left our last interview. So he's had 2 interviews at this point. We haven't met him in person. He hasn't done a practical audition because he lives out of state. So he says this was about a month ago. So back in April, he says he will be graduating within the next month in May. So we said, hey, when you're graduated, if you make it down to Chicago to, look for an apartment, to do some job hunting, let us know when you're going to be in the area. We would love to meet you, give you a tour. And if we're still in the process of moving things forward, we can schedule during that time to set up your practical audition. So he said, great, let me get back to you when I'm going to be in the area. So within the next day or so, he emails and says, hey, I'm going to be in Chicago this whatever upcoming weekend. Are you going to be available? I'd love to come in and meet you. And we said, yes, we can absolutely make that happen. Just keep us up to date on your timeline. We'll make sure that either one of us are available to come and meet with you and potentially do your practical audition. Which then came to a follow-up email of, great, my plane is arriving at this day, this time. Please let me know how your club is going to compensate me for my airfare and hotel. So at that point, it was a big red flag and a big pump the brakes. And my response to this email was, hey, I'm going to call you sometime today. We need to have an actual conversation. What time works best for you? So we set up a phone call. And I reached out to him and pretty much just said, I want to make things clear, because on my end, I thought it was clear that if you are going to be in the city to apartment hunt and job hunt, because you are moving several states away to a new city, I would expect someone to come in person to do those sort of things. So I was under the assumption that during that time where you would just happen to be in the area, that's where we can meet you in person. I wasn't trying to invite you here for an interview, for an audition while you're still in school. And that's where the disconnect was. So he was very nice about it. He's like, yeah, I totally understand. But that kind of got the wheels turning because I'm just trying to replay the conversations I've had with him in my mind. Where did I offer him a plane ticket and hotel compensation? It never happened. I guarantee you it never happened. But trying to replay, where did he think that came from? So I'm starting to think, what is he learning in his neck of the woods, whether it's from a professor or the department he's in studying kinesiology? Is this something that is being taught now? What is the expectation? Something different than it was when you and I got started in the industry? Is it now an expectation to fly entry-level trainers and instructors out when you applied to me and compensate for your hotel and plane? It was just, Staci, it just kind of threw me for a loop. So long story short, this applicant ended up after that, when we reset the bar, saying we are not going to pay you for anything. If you happen to be in the neighborhood, in the area, let us know. We'd love to meet you, because you're such a rock star on paper and we really enjoyed our conversations with you. He ended up reaching back and saying, no, he's not going to move to Chicago after all. He's going to stay in his small town that he's currently in, probably because moving to a big city like Chicago is a big financial jump, especially when we know as fitness professionals, there is no guarantee that you are essentially, if you don't have clients, then you're not making money, and it's an expensive city. So I get the reason as to why he decided not to, but it really threw me for a loop that right off the bat, an entry-level trainer can make that demand and can ask that. So I'm just wondering, where is this in the fitness industry that this is being set as a new expectation?
Yeah, and possibly just that we are in so much need of trainers that the expectation is being created because they're like, you need me real bad, which is true.
It is true.
We do. Yeah. And so it's hard to say. I would be super curious if people who are listening to this have had the same experience too. We'd love to hear from you either on Instagram or on YouTube. Share in the comments, like, have you had this happen before? Is it something that's being talked about in universities? Like, what do you know about that? Because it's really interesting. I'm glad she brought that story up, because the expectations that we do obtain in the interview process are quite exorbitant. And we even had talked about that in our hiring series, some of the crazy expectations we've experienced. Um,
Yeah.
it's pretty incredible. So yeah, we're both super curious, genuinely curious about that. And I'm sure, I mean, what something we'll speak to later is researching what other facilities are doing, and that's something Jessica's done really, really well, is look at what other job postings there are in the area at competitive facilities to try to
Hmm.
show how her facility can improve their job postings and improve, the language they use or the benefits they share, to entice people. And maybe there's some onboarding information you can gain from, insiders if you can learn, is because if there is a facility that's doing that in your area, that's going to make it really hard for you. So it's worth it to kind of investigate where that's
Absolutely.
coming from. Yeah. Um, absolutely.
And you have some great stories too, Stacy. Tell me about your one of your compensation stories. You have a couple good ones.
I have a couple good ones. One of them being, I'll pivot away from the, more introductory phase just to go to maybe working with instructors that you've worked with for a really long time. So this situation came up pre-pandemic. Was a new facility was being opened nearby, and
Mhm.
they were actively poaching instructors.
Yeah.
So I, as a big proponent, myself and Jessica have always been in increasing our instructor rates. Almost every year, I would say, we
Yeah.
gave someone, and this is the weird part about the fitness industry. If you're new to the fitness industry, here's the deal. Majority of the time, majority of the time each year, if you are a fitness instructor or personal trainer, your raise is like $2.50 in most
Hmm.
cases. That's decent. In some cases, I've heard $1 of your entire year of work has guaranteed you an increase of $1, and
Hmm.
it hasn't even guaranteed you that your performance is evaluated.
Right.
So that was our cadence for the longest time. I was starting to feel like it was getting slow, and especially with, inflation, the cost of living, and that's where we're at right now, especially after
Absolutely.
pandemic. At this point in this challenge where this other facility had come to the area, we were recognizing that they were trying to basically take our instructors. So thankfully, our relationship with our instructors was good enough that while this person or these people were coming into the facility taking classes, after they take the class, they basically walk up to the instructor, show them their business card, hand them their business card, and say, I work for X Club, and we're willing to pay you blah, blah, blah for you to come work for us. And
Mhm.
the amounts they were willing to pay these instructors were insane.
Ridiculous.
Like,
Yeah.
let's say an instructor starting, and I would say a high average is $40 to $50 for an
Mhm.
instructor's compensation. And in some cases,
Yeah.
personal trainers are making that much per session.
Mhm.
They were willing to go up to as high as 85, 90, if the instructor had asked, maybe 100. Because the good news
Mhm.
about these facilities is they understood, as soon as we can build some rock star instructors and trainers to build our membership, because we're a brand new facility, then we're going to actually have people to serve. So they
Mhm.
understood that their talent was that important, which is wonderful, but it also put a really big challenge on our own team. We had over 100 instructors. If we chose to increase everyone's rate by that amount, then we would have been out of business. There was no way
Absolutely.
we could have paid all of our instructors that amount. So instead, I will say, the instructors would, there was this constant battle. We had meeting after meeting after meeting with the instructors, with the upper management. Looking back, I will say, I think you're in this space at the time, you're very scary. It can be very scary. And I think the mentality we need to have more in this industry is not the scarcity mentality where we think, if this instructor leaves for this facility, which, what's looking back too, that's funny, is that facility wasn't very big. It was probably an eighth of the size of the facility we were
Yeah.
working with. The membership was not nearly going to be as much. Their classes were not going to be as full. Their cup was not going to be as full. They were going to be put into a box where at our facility they were really free. So if we had approached the experience a bit differently and showed them all of the things that they could benefit from by staying with us versus playing the numbers game of going, okay, they said they'll pay you this much, then we'll pay you this much. Okay, they said
Right.
they'll pay you this much, we'll pay you this much. There needed to be more compromise where we could show them what we would give them without paying them more, and what
Mhm.
in return they need to give us if we were going to raise them to that rate. And that didn't happen, to be honest. Our upper management team was so afraid of losing these instructors
Yeah.
that they basically got to the point where they said yes to whatever demands they had, which put
Mm.
us as managers in a really bad position because it's icky when you know an instructor is being paid a certain amount and you know another instructor who's been there much longer who continues to make themselves better, because it's not always about how long an instructor's with you. They also need to be a badass, working hard, like working to improve instructor. Those instructors were getting paid a lot less. So it was
Yeah.
really rough for both of us, I know. Over time, we were able to continue to build up the rates of the instructors who were not in the position to basically hold our club hostage. And I feel like the rates overall, it did benefit the team. Overall, those rates did go up and elevate quite a bit. But it still is not even to this day. There are definitely instructors making much more than they should be, and not necessarily putting forth the effort any more than they were. So that's the challenge. And that's why this equation is really challenging to solve. So in that situation, though, I have to admit, avoid the scarcity mindset, get really real with that instructor if they're going through that battle. And I can assure you, like I'm looking at your eyeballs right now, anyone who's listening and watching right now, you will find talent that's, if not good, if not better than the instructor you had. It'll happen. It's just going to take a long time and you're going to have to be patient. It's okay if that person leaves because you can't match whatever that other club is willing to pay them.
Yeah.
And that battle is just not willing. It's just, you shouldn't be willing to fight that battle at a certain point. You know, there are
Yeah.
other ways to make it happen. Like I said, make sure they can give you extra things, make sure, and in some cases, if they're a master instructor, that can help too. You could say, all right, we'll pay you this, but you need to do at least 3 trainings with our team for free, kind of thing. Like some way, or 50% off or something.
Yeah.
So that was a really challenging time.
Yeah,
So,
I remember when that happened, and I remember that the senior management, the upper management, threw a fit over this new facility coming into town. And you and I very much had the mentality of our team is loyal, our team knows how good they have it here, and our team knows that we have their back.
mhm,
So there were some instructors that very much were, I'm going to go teach over here. And if you want to keep me here, then you need to pay me XYZ. And then the higher ups were like, well, let's pay them XYZ. And you and I
yeah.
were very much under the mentality of, no, they are not worth this. And not that they're not worth this, but they're not worth it. They're not worth a $40, $50 increase while someone else with the
Mhm,
same amount of experience, education, tenure is
mhm,
making significantly less. So if you're going to
mhm,
bump up one, you're going to bump up everyone else. And I think
mhm.
you and I had to have that conversation with a few of the instructors. And and then I remember when the non-competes came out,
Yes.
and we had to have non-competes for this, specifically for this facility. And we
Mhm,
had to track down each individual instructor, 100+ instructors, have them
mhm,
sign this non-compete that they will not go teach. It was somewhere, what, within like a 5-mile radius or something like that. Something like that. So
mhm,
they couldn't teach at this new facility. And in hindsight, there are a few instructors where we've talked about this, where it should have been, we should have just let them go. Because
yep.
in the end, they were more trouble than what it's worth, because they were the instructors who were demanding 70, 80, $90 a class,
Mhm,
and then would request
mhm.
to sub every class under the sun, where
Yep.
then you and I would deny sub requests, and then it would cause a tantrum because we weren't giving them
Mhm,
enough work.
mhm.
So it ended up being more trouble than it was worth. It was a very eye-opening experience
Yeah.
with that specific incident.
Oh, definitely. As hard as it was, I think you, especially when you look up to I did really look up to some of our upper managers, and to see them really go through this, like, this scared space that I'd never seen
Yeah,
them go through
they were
was,
scared.
it made us scary, you know what I mean? And we really were constantly, Jessica and I are always on the same page, which is wonderful, where we would look at each other and talk to each other and go like, we really shouldn't be that nervous about this other place. It's not that big of a deal. Like, it'll work. It's going to be uncomfortable for a little bit, but it's going to work itself out. We are a better facility. We are a better team. And
Mhm.
it really was a lot more drama than it needed to be. And I think the non-compete made things worse, really, because, and I'm glad you brought it up, because it not only rattled the compensation cage, but it also rattled, I thought this facility I've been working at for so long just was confident enough to just have me on their team and
Right.
trust in me to do what's right. And by asking
Hmm.
them to sign this piece of paper, having to explain to them, I need you to sign this because basically we're scared. Like we're
Yeah.
scared of this other facility.
Yeah.
How lame does that sound? So just good people are going to do good things, and when they do wrong by you, that's when you can take action. But when you do preemptively have non-competes, which honestly, for all of you listening, non-competes just don't work anymore, and that's a good thing. They shouldn't, you know. So it's really interesting, that whole situation. Like you said, great learning lesson. Those of you who are listening, if you go through something like that, just know, be confident enough in your team and yourself that it's going to be okay.
And if there is a team member who is that adamant that you need to pay them more, or this other facility can provide them with so much more opportunity, then just let them go because you're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, you really are. You really are. And majority of the time, the grass is not always greener. And some of those promises are pretty empty promises of what they're going to pay you. That you may take off to another studio. A lot of the time with studios, they say, yes, you're going to make this amount, but it's only if you have this amount of participants in your class. And they have to be a certain tier of membership, paying a certain tier of price in order for you to get that compensation. It gets really complicated really fast and it's not because people are trying to gyp instructors. I don't always like to make the club the enemy. They
Hmm.
genuinely have to afford the facility itself, and that's a
Yeah.
lot of money and marketing and all of it, and supporting upper management and middle management like yourself and us, like fitness managers. We need to make money too, and half
Hmm.
of that is due to whatever budget or revenue our team is making. So it gets really complicated. That's where it gets really complicated. The next story I have is similar to Jessica's, actually. Very interesting expectations from a new applicant, where I had gone through hiring process, onboarding process, interviewed him, signed a contract, which on the contract, the company I work for now specifically says their pay structure. Taught his first class, reached out to me and said he will only continue teaching with us if he gets compensated double what we had offered him. I was like, bro, you've signed the contract. You know how much
Wow.
we're going to pay you. After your first class, for you to make that decision, I honestly, it's funny because I think he had such an ego. Teaching at the facilities that we oversee is challenging. So most of the facilities our coaches teach in is residential. So it's not easy. They don't have a microphone and a stereo system and all the weights they could ever imagine, equipment they can imagine. So it is challenging. And I think because it was hard for him to teach in that space, he wanted to be paid more. That's what he believed he deserved. It was just astonishing to like have that challenge. Thank goodness I had a few other coaches ready to go, and I could do what we wish we could have done with those other coaches and just said, well, peace out, dude. Like you're not teaching for us anymore because that's not happening. I was going to say something else to that point, but it was really interesting. That was unusual.
Yeah, that's
Very
crazy.
unusual.
I mean, the
Oh,
audacity of some instructors just
yeah.
after a contract is signed, coming back to say, "I'll only work for you if you pay me double."
And
That's
so,
unreal.
yeah, and I think the funny part was that his ego was so much that he was going to, grow his classes and grow his clients. But after his class, we got no reviews. So we hound our clients every time they teach a class that
Yeah,
if you could please leave a positive review if you had a great experience. And majority of the time they do, especially with new coaches.
that's
This
great.
person got zero reviews. So I'm sure it wasn't, not that it was bad, but it obviously wasn't good enough that no one shared anything about the experience being that great.
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting thing. So now that we've shared our wonderful stories and just how challenging and complicated it can be for compensation, let's go ahead and tackle overall compensation. So Jessica, if you can share, and again, we're not going to give you numbers, but what are some ways that you like to potentially review the area or research or get an idea of what compensation looks like in your area? How do you do that, and do you do that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I do like to research competitors in the area just because our club, my facility, prides itself on being competitive. So I want to make sure that that is the case, especially with the struggle that's been with hiring full and part-time trainers and instructors. So I have been looking at other facilities in the area just to see what they pay their instructors. So I've gone so far as making a spreadsheet over here is the range that they make for instructors and trainers, and here are all the benefits. And just kind of listing them out side by side, because we know as applicants, when if you are going and just typing in fitness instructor or personal trainer in whatever city, there's going to be a good amount of listings that pop up. So what sets your listing apart from everyone else's? So if you just say you can make between X amount and X amount, then that's fine. But every other facility in the area is also paying that same amount. So what sets you apart? There have been some other facilities, not the club that I work at, but other facilities that offer some pretty awesome things. There's one club that I saw that offers like mental health support and things like that, which I think, especially in the in 2023, I think is really important and something you don't see very much of. But I thought that would be a huge benefit. If you're an instructor who could benefit from something like that, then of course you want to know that your management, that your facility has your back with something like that. So that's something that's been really interesting while I've been researching.
Yeah, I think the benefits is really great for you to look at. So ways to do that, like Jessica said, are to go to the different hiring pages. A lot of the time they'll explain compensation, starting compensation. So where are you going to start people at? Another way, I've done some of my research just in hiring across the country, because it has been really interesting to learn, what we pay a coach in Texas is very different from what we would pay them in New York. Recognizing the challenge potentially for what your club can facilitate when it comes to getting to you. So, and parking. So in the cases for us, if the facility doesn't compensate for parking, doesn't pay for the coach park, or doesn't allow for them to park like on site or in the garage, how do we try to facilitate that? So it really depends on the contract we work with too at times, but that's how I would research. If there are facilities who are doing more for education, more for like mental health, like Jessica said, possibly childcare. I know that's something at the facility she and I worked at together. There was a full preschool basically and childcare at the facility. And we were able to do a deal where if an instructor was teaching a class, I don't know, I think there's now a situation they've worked out for personal trainers too, where they could get maybe a discount on childcare, or they could go as far as covering the childcare for that class and maybe like 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after. So that's a huge benefit. And if you have counseling already, why not make that a benefit? You can try to blend that into whatever insurance company you work with. There are ways to get creative. Education obviously is something Jessica and I have talked about. So how do you provide in-house education? How do you provide discounts in education? What are maybe continuing education contracts you provide to your team? That is a form of compensation, because they have to keep their CECs in order to keep coaching and working with you. But you're helping them accomplish that basically, and more in some cases. So in furthering their career, something Jessica and I did, and I alluded to this in our last podcast, was if you have someone who wants to further their career, let's say they're a personal trainer, but they really want to do private Pilates and they want to take their career further by doing that training. Pilates training is very expensive and very intense. So what we did is we had our own in-house Pilates training program. So I would say partner with a Pilates team or Pilates company, whether we partnered with Balanced Body, which I highly recommend. You can partner with Peak, you can partner with Vazzy or Marathon, Stop Pilates. You can work with them, get one of your own instructors to become a master instructor, and then basically pay for the training for the instructors who want to go through, instructors or trainers who want to go through the training. Then create a contract. What we did is there was basically a graph of how many hours they could teach Pilates for us once they were done with their certification, and how long it would take them to pay back us compensating the training. So maybe you front the cost, but they aren't technically done paying it back until they've seen that many clients. And then if they were to leave for whatever reason, because that's the biggest concern as a club, if they leave, if they move, then that contract binds them to, if they haven't seen a certain number of clients or taught a certain number of classes of that format specifically, you have to track that and you have to go back and say, all right, you owe us this much for the training because you've only
Yeah.
gotten to this amount of clients. So that saved us because it takes a long time to build clientele, just like it does for a trainer, or teach classes at various formats. And so we're happy to help you build that contract or work on that contract, but it was a huge benefit for our team. Like no one else is
Yeah.
doing that, especially for private Pilates. And you can go as far as yoga. Those are extensive certifications a lot of people want,
Definitely.
but can't afford on their own, or most likely just don't want to have to pay for it or do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
was a big one. So those are
Mhm.
creative ways to get competitive and get strategic. So in pay and for education.
Mhm.
Um, Next is I wanted to ask Jessica, what are anything that you can think of for compensation and education that we haven't talked about so far?
The only other thing really for education is something that we've kind of touched on is that we, aside from like the balanced body Pilates contract that we've had, we have also brought in other trainings to
Mhm,
our old facilities. So we've had like Schwinn and TRX and other
mhm.
things come in, and usually those companies will give us a free spot.
Yeah.
So that's been a great way to help bring instructors and trainers into getting certified
Mhm.
for whatever format it is. So that's just kind of been a really great relationship that we've been able to have, is that when once we've done an in-house training, is that we've been able to provide a free spot or maybe a discounted spot for
Mhm.
that training. So it's a nice opportunity for instructors to get trained in something without having to pay full price.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up because when you do that as well, you should. Some places won't open it up to other instructors at other facilities because they think, oh, they're the competitors. And then we're just going to
Mhm.
be training our competitors, which was actually a battle I had to fight at the facility we worked with, which was really annoying. But if you can help them understand, no, actually, it elevates your entire facility as being seen as the provider for education in your community. So that actually happened. The word got around that we were hosting trainings all the time and that we were the place to teach at because you could potentially get TRX certified for free, and we were constantly leveling up our team, and whoever attended the trainings at our facility got to walk, like step foot in the facility, look around, actually experience
Mhm.
the facility, see the members, see the front desk, see what it's like to be there, and actually consider, hey, I might want to work here. And
Yeah.
then if you can be visible at the training with your own card, you're not poaching anyone. They chose to step foot in your facility and do a training with your team. If they come into that training as someone who doesn't work at your facility, you can share with them, we're looking for instructors. And sure enough, they may reach out to you, which happened a lot, saying, hey, I attended your TRX training last weekend, really interested in working with you. I've heard great things. They also are honestly they're training with your team, which is a great time for them to ask questions about what it's like to work at your facility. And hopefully your team has your back,
Yeah.
and they should, I mean, in a training, but that was a great way for them to go, okay, I definitely want to work here. I want to be with these people. I want to be surrounded by these people. And then we were able to hire new instructors that way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That
it
was
was
a
a
really
win-win.
good trick to get new instructors in the door.
Yeah, it was a win-win for sure. So those are really my biggest thoughts on pay. I would love to go through some ways. I'll just list off some ways you can compensate your team and get strategic. And then I'm actually going to tackle personal training a little bit because throughout the industry and with some more consultants I've been talking to, actually more recently one I worked with in the UK, he has a really interesting pricing model, which I actually in the show notes I'll share his pricing model because he works with personal training studios and really consults them on improving their bottom line so that they're paying their team the correct amount so that they actually make the correct amount as a facility. And I think that's a big challenge in the fitness industry because, like we gave those examples earlier, there are a lot of people who come with these demanding numbers, and it's tempting to just say yes to them. But if your bottom line is not where it needs to be, you're not going to stay in business. So it has to be accurate. So I will share that worksheet link for you, and then you can learn more about his business as well in the UK, and he works with people in the States too. But what I highly recommend is for group fitness classes, considering these three strategies for paying your instructors. So the normal way we've paid instructors for a long time has been a base commission. So a normal, here's your number, here's your $40, here's your $45. This is what you are paid for your classes. And it's usually just for the hour that they're teaching, but you're looping in all of the other things like clocking in and out, checking their email, that commission stays the same. Then you can, on top of that, possibly pay them if you have additional meetings, or you have, you could have a different pay rate for those things. If they're coming in for something else that you're asking them to do, you have to pay them for their time, but you don't always have to pay them that $45 rate. You could do 15, 20, 25, do above minimum wage, ideally, is what you should pay them. Another way to pay instructors specifically is in number of participants. And there's two ways to do that, actually. One would be you start at a base rate, and then that's the minimum that they will make. But if they have over a certain amount of people, let's say they have over 10 people, you will pay them $2.50 more for each participant that comes. In that case, you most likely are going to want that to be a paid program, because that means you have to be making more money in order to compensate the instructor for bringing in that amount of people. So that's another way to do it. That another way you could do it is there's no base rate, which in some cases I know facilities have to do. There's no base rate. Like, you're not guaranteed to be paid anything until you have a certain number of people to walk into the door and take your classes or do your sessions. For personal training, so those are the three ways you can compensate a group fitness instructor. Can you think of anything else, Jessica, like different formulas that people have done for paying instructors?
No, I think those are pretty much the most common ones that I've experienced so far. Yeah. I think the most common one that I've really experienced is just the flat rate. This is what you make per class, and that includes clocking in and out. That includes prep, which is, you and I know that's ridiculous, because we know how much prep goes into something, and then paying per head is another common one, especially in studios, I feel.
And actually, you bringing up prep brings up, you also may need to compensate them for the music that they're playing. So if they have to purchase music in order to, maybe there's a certain type of music you have to have them play in their classes, maybe you need to be unlicensed, then you should compensate them for that or reimburse them for that. Another way to pay them, I just realized, is potentially percentage for classes. So this would be more for an enrollment class. So like with Jessica's small group example, you could do the base rate, and then for all additional signups, pay a certain amount. But what we ended up doing actually at the larger facility we both worked at was there was a max number of attendants that could basically join a class that was an enrollment class. So progressive, similar to like Jessica was saying, whether it was progressive in intensity or progressive in complexity, being a choreograph class or kickboxing class, the participants had paid for that class ahead of time. So whatever that revenue was that you received, you could compensate the instructor a percentage of that. So that would be more of a lump sum, and then you'd get to handle, which would be really fun, not so fun, how you would compensate subs and things like that too. So you'd have to think about all of that, which would get really complicated. Really complicated. So I don't know. You can choose how complicated you want to make this strategy be, but a new thing for personal trainers I'm finding in the industry that I actually really like is because they've been struggling with the same things Jessica was sharing. A lot of us facilities were like, you have to be a 40-hour personal trainer or don't work with us. And that's just not realistic anymore. It's not something people can or are willing to do. And it's really hard. It's kind of challenging as a trainer, I can't imagine seeing 40 clients a week personally. I see a few now, and no, thank you. It's just my energy.
That's enough. The few is enough.
Yeah, my energy could not, but I also, we're both working full time as managers too. So that's what gets challenging too, energy wise. But what I'm hearing is going the wrong direction is I have actually heard recently from an instructor I know who's applying at places right now because she is relocating, that facilities are saying, because she really wants to teach Pilates and personal train. And they're going the wrong way because they're saying, okay, then you need to make 40 hours as a personal trainer. Whatever you want to do for Pilates, you do on top of that.
Oh,
I was like,
interesting.
what? I was like, any classes you teach, any Pilates clients you teach have to be on top of your 40 hours. So you still have to, you're expected to make the 40 hours. And then anything beyond that is on you.
Oh, that's crazy. So she couldn't do 20 hours as a Pilates instructor and 20 hours as a personal trainer to be essentially a full-time employee.
Yep.
Stacey, that's ridiculous.
That's
What is
ridiculous.
that?
So if your
That's
club is
crazy.
doing that, put the kibosh on it now because no one's going
No,
to do it.
no.
And I understand, like Jessica said, the 2020 would be perfect, like a perfect world. That would be amazing if there was like 20 hours personal training, 20 hours Pilates. I think the thing that scares these facilities is that what if there's an imbalance? What if one month she sees 23 Pilates clients and then, you know, 19 or 18, like it's
Well,
like,
the question, Stacey, is regardless of if they're seeing as a personal training client or a Pilates client, is the club making money?
yeah,
That's the question. Who cares what bucket it comes from as
yeah,
long as the facility is
yeah.
making money?
Yeah.
That's
And so,
crazy. That is
yeah. And
crazy.
so that is where I get upset because I'm trying to like advocate for these clubs because I understand it's not easy to run a business. It's not easy to
Mhm.
afford to keep the lights on and the water and all that fun stuff. But when you make decisions like that because of that scarcity mindset, once again, what if you answered it just correctly. Like it's at the end of the day, we're making money off of this instructor. They're providing more services to more people and maybe even more services to the same people who are going to be members for longer. It's just a no-brainer to me. But that was
Yeah.
interesting. So that's out there. Don't be that facility. Don't do that. But what I'm hearing for personal training that's a good thing is as a trainer continues to grow, what we've done in the past is we've always said, okay, you need to now raise your rate and tell all your clients. And that's not very fun. I mean, it's kind of intimidating, even if you're a really good trainer and you've grown and you've developed and it's been 3 years since you've increased your rate. You have every right to do that, but it still can be uncomfortable. So that is the old way of doing it. You used to, and some places can still do that. It's not a bad thing. But what I'm finding is happening is instead of the trainer having to tell the clients that they're raising their rate, and then getting paid the same percentage as they were before. What some facilities are doing now is they are raising the trainer's rate. They're taking on the responsibility to educate the clients so that it becomes
Mhm.
more of a club decision, which takes a little bit of the weight off of the personal trainer instructor. And it's a bit more of a blanket statement from the company. And then the trainer is now given the responsibility to basically also personally educate them. Be like, oh, did you get the
Yeah.
email from the facility? Just reminding you my rate is increasing because they are seeing them one on one. So that's helpful.
Yeah. That's what
The
my
other,
team does for clients.
oh, perfect. Yeah. And then the other thing that they're doing is along with increasing the rate of a really tenured trainer, is they are also changing the percentage that the trainer takes home. So the justification I heard from a facility that was really nice, because at first I was like, oh, shoot. So that means, let's say you increase the rate of a trainer by $5. So it was like, let's say it was the client was paying $100 a session. Now they're paying $105. And the split is the same for the coach. So they're still taking home maybe 48 or 50% of that commission. As they grow as a tenured trainer, that commission split also increases. And the
I love that.
justification, which is cool, the
Mhm.
justification to that is that a younger trainer, a newer trainer, an entry level trainer, there's a lot of hand holding. Like there's a lot of work that Jessica has to do to keep that person in line, to make sure that they're doing their job. They're also more likely to run into a lot of client turnover. So and it's not just them, it's just them growing and developing in their skills and abilities and having the right clients come to them. A more
Mhm.
tenured trainer is a lot less work. They're already, you don't have
Sure.
to spend as much time or money to keep that person productive. And that person is already more productive than the trainer who's new because they're keeping their clients most likely. So I thought that was really interesting. Not only are they increasing their
Yeah.
rate, but they're also changing the split. So the club does take home less, which can be scary. But it doesn't have to be a lot. It could just be, just enough to make that trainer feel good. about themselves. Yeah.
I love that. And I think the reasoning is pretty solid because you hit the nail on the head. A new trainer who is making like level one salary or level one commission, they need a lot of hand holding. They need a lot of meetings of what have you been doing? How have you been reaching your client goals? Uh, how are you acting at the club? They need a lot more one-on-one attention than a more veteran trainer who has been there for a while, who has the experience, who has probably built up their client base at that point. So they don't really need that much attention. So I think that completely makes sense that they should take home a higher percentage of the split. So I think that's amazing. I would love to hear more about that. And to piggyback off what you were saying before on if you are increasing the price for a personal trainer, what's been really successful with my facility and my trainers, because I've been through a few different raises with my trainers at this point, is I will give their clients about 30 days notice. So I will send a mass email to everyone and I will say, great news, our trainer so and so has moved up in level. So we have different tiers, different levels at our facility. So they've moved up. We're really excited to celebrate them. And the reason why they've moved up is because they've received this continuing education. They've added this certification onto their belt to help add value to you as their client. So you can still use whatever sessions you have left. If you want to buy another package at their current rate, you have the next 30 days to do so. Effective this date, they are going to move up to this level. So plan accordingly. And that's gotten really positive results. So I've had so many clients just reach back out, excited to celebrate their trainer because at that point, they've usually developed a rapport with that trainer. So they're excited to celebrate them too. And yes, there are definitely trainers who will go ahead and buy like a 50 pack of sessions at their current level, but we've given them the opportunity to do so because it can be really, it can blindside a lot of people if just right away, if you're like low on your sessions and you're like, well, tomorrow your sessions are going to increase $2,000. That can be, that can be a big slap in the face. So we've given them the opportunity. We've let them know that we are going to increase the price. So that's been a really successful experience with my team.
I love that. I'm so glad you shared that because that's huge. I think a lot of facilities really don't know how to handle that situation. They know they need to increase the rates of their trainers and or instructors or the class rates, and it's really important to give them a heads up. Jump through the hoops. You may get some feedback. I mean, I work with software companies a lot and they have to raise their rates. Everyone has to raise their rate. Every business has to raise their rates.
Yeah.
If someone doesn't understand that, then I'm sorry. That's rough for you. Like you're going to be hurt a lot in your life.
Yeah.
But it can be really scary and intimidating that happens. That some software companies, even they're like, oh my gosh, I've just got out of like 50 meetings with clients who are like threatening to leave because we've increased our rate and it's been 10 years since we raised our rate. So it is uncomfortable, but it's very necessary and very, very worth it. So I'm so glad you brought that up. But I hope we've provided you in this episode ways to get creative on compensation without necessarily having to increase their rate, ways to get creative on the pay structure. You can provide your clients or provide your instructors if raising their rate is not in your means right now, if you could start charging for certain services in order to allow that rate to be increased, or do some of those unique pay structures that I shared earlier. And then the new change in compensation that I'm hearing in the industry among personal training. Hopefully that was helpful for you to be like, you know what, that makes sense to me. I don't have to work as hard with a 10-year personal trainer. I might as well start making some tweaks to the compensation percentages that I'm paying my personal trainers. So we hope that those were helpful. We'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas on what you're doing or what you're seeing in the industry and ways that you're compensating your team. Anything else, Jessica, you can think of?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything today, Staci.
Yeah. We may not have solved the equation. We're happy to help you individually, if we can make sense of that. But I will share again that that basically equation spreadsheet that I've worked with Nikki from the UK. He has a great business where he's helping these personal training studios continue to grow their business. And I'll share that in the show notes of where you can find his information, where you can find his
Awesome.
spreadsheet so that you can build that spreadsheet for yourself based on what you do currently. So more
Awesome.
resources to come from both of us. But next, the perfect, I guess, lead into our next episode is that episode 9 coming up soon is going to be all about raises. So we've definitely talked about compensation. We've talked about how to increase those pay rates, but what is an appropriate raise and when should it happen? Should it be an expectation for the club? Should it be something that there are milestones that an instructor or a personal trainer needs to hit in order to hit that increase? How much of an increase is enough? We're going to talk
Hmm.
about all of those things in our next episode, where we talk about all about raises. But thank you so much for listening as always, or watching as always.